I did take a break. I was going through some mental things. I felt a little dark. I went through a little... I went through some anxiety and depression, and I just tried my best to stay strong. That's it.
Welcome to the We Are Not Born Failures podcast. I'm your host, Moises Linares, and you just heard the cry, the expression, the sentiment of former multi-division boxing champion Danny Garcia, uno de los mejores boxeadores de la última década, llorando, expresándose, platicando de un momento difícil por el cual atravesaba en ese momento de esa pelea. But I'm here to tell you why real men, or better put it, why it's not okay for real men to cry. I know it's difficult to speak about these topics. I know you're probably wondering, what are you talking about, Moises? But it's not okay for real men to cry. It's not. It's necessary. See, I got you. I know you were thinking already negative stuff, but that's not the case. It is necessary for men to cry. I think it's one of those topics we're just learning over the past decade. We're finally starting to speak about this topic. And I go back and I think about my childhood and what it was like to be a kid. Growing up in a predominantly Latino, Central American family, familia salvadoreña, uncle's always saying that it was not okay to cry, that strong men don't cry, they don't show emotions, that you're supposed to be, you're supposed to have that poker face. Crying was not accepted. In fact, sometimes when we cried in public or within the family, we were scolded, right? What can I tell you? It was just part of growing up in certain families. But as time has passed, I think the narrative has started to change just a bit. I don't think we're quite there yet. And why did I decide to speak about this topic on this episode of the podcast? Well, to be honest with you, sometimes I just kind of brainstorm and I'm by myself thinking of things to talk about. And I was thinking about the fact that over the course of the last couple of years, I've made myself and I've been open to being vulnerable. And a lot of people confuse that word. A lot of people think that's a sign of weakness, that if you're vulnerable, you're not truly strong. And I argue that it's the opposite, right? To give credit, because you have to give credit when credit is due. The great Dr. Brené Brown talks about that and the importance of being vulnerable. Sometimes we are not, because we are taught that you have to be strong, that you're not supposed to show any type of emotion, especially young boys. I think that was my case. Growing up, it was one of those things that never happened. And I go back and I try to remember moments where I cried. And it's difficult because I truly can't remember many. Yeah, sometimes you got punished and you cried because it hurt. Sometimes you fell or you injured yourself and you probably cried, but it was a different type of cry. On many instances, when serious things happen, instead of letting it out, you actually you put it deep down inside, right? You suppress those emotions. You didn't show it. I can recall many, many times growing up in the streets of Los Angeles, growing up when my mom and an abusive stepfather who used to beat on my mother. And I remember that because talking to friends, we had this conversation recently. And it was on the topic of seeing my mom get beat up by a man as a young boy. And instead of crying in that moment, what I used to do was I used to run. I would run to the nearest payphone. If you're not old enough to remember what a payphone is, maybe you should Google it and then you'll have an idea. There's not a lot of payphones nowadays. I think we still have a couple of payphones around, but they're not very common like they used to be. You used to have a payphone in every corner in your neighborhood. At least I did, in the streets of South Central Los Angeles. But I do remember that. I remember running as fast as I could, just sprinting down the street, looking for the payphone, picking it up, calling 911, asking for help, and then running back to my home to find my mother, just laying down or, pretty bruised up. And it was tough. And instead of crying like I think a normal kid would, instead of crying and saying, Mom, why? I would have to put on a different cap on. And that was the cap of becoming an adult almost instantly. Instantly becoming an adult, trying to be the protector instead of the son. And today, you perhaps know kids who go through this. You probably heard of stories of people that go through this because it's a cycle that doesn't end. It's a thing that just keeps happening and happening and happening. The point is that in those moments, I had to forget about being a kid. I had to forget about being emotional. I had to be strong because in many instances, if you're a young boy, being strong, right, not crying is associated with bravery. And they tell you if real brave men don't cry. And I remember hearing that just repeatedly by different people. And that's what you're taught. And that's practically what you end up adopting. That's the belief that it's not okay. And I just fast forward my life and I started looking for instances of moments where I was probably emotional. Perhaps when a family member passed away or a friend. But to be honest with you, there was even instances where people I knew who died or were killed or went through tragic events, and I could be sad, but there was no emotions because I would suppress them, and it was just the normal thing to do. Showing a poker face, right? And those experiences that I just mentioned. Well, let me tell you, now it's quite different. And how did it change or what happened? There wasn't a magic pill. I didn't take anything to change the way that I felt. I think the first moment where I truly became an emotional man, a man who's open about crying, because I think I'm a big crier now. I'm not gonna lie to you. And I know a lot of my friends are too. Don't lie. Don't say that you're not, because I know a lot of men, a lot of my childhood friends now as older individuals, they're more open to crying, to letting emotions out, which is a good thing. It is a very good thing. For me personally, it was writing my book, doing my research, just going back, interviewing people, and listening to the experience they had gone through. Excuse me. In those moments when this was happening to them and when I was speaking to them about the experiences they had lived through, I remember still holding a poker face, not showing emotions, although inside it bothered me and it would make me feel sad for my family. And I was simply recording these conversations on a tape recorder or my cell phone. And when I went back and I was by myself and I would listen to these interviews and just kind of put myself in their shoes, that's when I truly just opened up. And I remember one night, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning. It's the pandemic. And I am just writing and writing and writing. And all of a sudden, I hear one of the interviews and I just break down and I start to cry uncontrollably. And I'm just letting it out. And I'm just like, what's happening right now? Have no idea what's happening. Have no idea why I just opened up. But then I felt that it was necessary. And then I started doing my research. And then I started finding out about suppressed emotions. And I have a few friends that are therapists. And I speak to them. All right? Going to therapy helps. I haven't done it enough. But yeah, I believe that it's very helpful. And from that moment forward, it was just like discovering water. It was just like, wow, this is incredible. I had no idea. And eventually, I don't cry in front of people. Not as often, I would think. I think the last time I cried in front of people was, again, my book event, the first one in Washington, D.C. And I'm just telling the story of my grandmother and what she meant to me. And all of a sudden, as I'm speaking, just the river of emotions just flushed down my body. And I began to cry and let it out. And that was the first time that I felt people saw me crying or just emotional, because in other occasions, I was just a brick wall. I'm not going to say anything, right? I'm just going to keep it all inside here. But I felt that it was something that helped me a lot. And from that point moving forward, if I felt like crying, preferably in privacy, I would do it. And then you start running into numbers and research and all these different institutes that focus on this type of topics or issues in the world. And you're like, wow. And, just doing my research, because I like to read up. When I talk about these things. And there's this crazy, there's this crazy survey that was done, or a poll to better put it. 21,000 people were part of this poll by the National Center for Health Statistics. And, it was said that men die by suicide 3.5 times more often than women do. Wow. That's insane. That's a big number. Also, 1 in 10 men experience depression and anxiety, according to this poll. That's insane. 3.5 times more than women. Men are more likely to commit suicide based on, anxiety, depression. Mental health is real. And the reason why I added the Danny Garcia clip is because sometimes we feel that based on somebody's status, they're different. They don't go through things. They don't suffer. They don't struggle. They don't have problems. Everyone has problems. We all have issues. We all struggle. We all have challenges that we have to overcome. Here, perhaps you too. I'm sure a lot of you do. But we just don't have enough safe spaces to talk about these issues. I see it happening often. I've gone through it myself. There's moments where you need that, you need that relief. You need to let it out. You need to express yourself. You need that moment for you. And we're taught that it's not okay. We're taught that it's not manly enough. And those are the things that need to change. Why am I telling you this? A lot of you have kids. A lot of you have young boys. And I'm including the girls as well. But it's more common and it's more accepted for a female to cry. But for a man, it's not, right? For a young boy, it's not. So if you have a son, if you have a nephew, if you have a friend, right? You have to make it okay. We have to make it okay. I think that's the big thing for me. We have to make it okay for this to happen so we can change the narrative down the road. It's not going to change overnight. It's not going to happen instantly, but we have to make it okay. Now, there's a difference between excessive crying, I would say, and just finding the right measure. For me, maybe for you it's different. It's all about the right measure. Where's the balance? If someone has to cry, go ahead, cry. If you have to let it out, let it out. It's perfectly fine. But there's a difference, and I think that's where things change a little bit between a lot of people and points of views and opinions. Where's the line? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you, and I'm not gonna get into that topic because I think that's a whole different conversation. What I'm presenting to you today is the fact that we need to create these spaces. We need to make sure that our young athletes, our young stars, our young sons, they're okay. They know and understand that it's a perfectly fine thing to do if they need to do it. Also, crying, according to the same research that I found, this one by Richview, the Richview Institute, I believe it's called. they say there's benefits from crying because according to them, I don't know if this is true. I would have to ask somebody who's in science, or if anybody of you out there know the answer, share it. Please do. Tears shed from emotion flush stress hormones from the body while also releasing endorphins. Ha! So, in a way, crying is a very healthy thing to do. I need to find the proof. I need to find, I believe it. I believe it. But like anything today, you need to back it up. You need to make sure that if you say it, you have proof to go along with it, because people are fast to question. People are fast to say you're wrong. Therefore, you need to have the science behind it to back you up. Hey, if crying is beneficial and healthy, I'm all for it. I know a lot of my female friends, they cry often. They tell me their stories. They say, I was home and I was crying. I let it out. Hey, good thing. I used to be very against it. I've changed my mind. So I am all for it. It is a very normal thing to do. And if I was against it, it was because I was taught differently. And I had to broaden my horizons for me to see life different, to learn about the pros and the cons about different topics in this world. Crying has been one of my, I guess, one of the topics that has hit me the hardest, because I think it's important. I think it's important to allow yourself to feel, whether it's a grief, whether it's a painful situation, whether it's a difficult moment. Sometimes we don't know. But by doing so, like the study says, you release that stress hormone. And after that, you feel good. Because if there's one thing that I've learned, that after you let a good cry out, you might feel the best. Trust me. Trust me. If you haven't done it, I recommend it. You should try it. You should try it. And see where that goes. See how you feel. If not, then, hey, you have the right to not cry as well. This is not an obligation. And I think that's the one thing we have to understand. Everybody works different. Everybody has a different point of view. Everybody might see things differently. For me, like I said, and it may be for you, it's helped. It's made me understand things better, see things better. And what I'm saying to you, most importantly, is we have to change that space to allow these kids to grow in a different atmosphere, to see life a little bit different, and to make their own choices, right? But for them to have the option to do so, not just be told, hey, it's not okay for you to do this or for you to do that. I think that's the main point of all this. And yes, so it's been quite a ride, let me say. The past couple weeks for me, for example, have been very difficult. And then you just need some space, you need some time. And I felt that for me, since I record these podcasts on a weekly basis, I have to go into them with a positive attitude, with 100% energy. And if I'm not feeling it, then I just kind of backtrack. I kind of say, you know what? If I'm not going to give 100% effort, then I'm not going to do it. And that's one thing that I've learned as well. And, going back to this topic, just for you to better understand, I would say that I found myself on different occasions being emotional by myself. Here's the crazy part. I have found myself being emotional while at the gym. That's insane. I know what you're thinking. I'm being serious. I'll be working out by myself and in a corner in the gym. And I don't know about you. I don't always listen to pumped up music. It changes. It varies depending on how I feel. I can be working out listening to some slow jams and I'm fine. I'll get through it. But there's been moments where probably something's happened or I'm thinking about something and I'm at the gym by myself, and all of a sudden, boom, start crying, and I pretty much just turn around. I go to a corner, just kind of chill out, sit down, and relax. But what I'm trying to say is, it's probably one of the most awkward places for anyone to cry, because it's supposed to be a place where you just, maybe that's my way of letting out steam. I'm not sure. I haven't figured that out yet, but it's happened, and it's very strange. I'm not gonna say that it's a bad thing, because if you have to let it out, you let it out. But I found myself in the gym, and just all of a sudden crying, and I'm not the crier who's crying uncontrollably, but tears are coming down, and I just kind of turn around, and I'm like, all right, bro, let it out, and let's get back to work, and pat yourself on the back. It's gonna be okay, and you keep it moving. Another place where I've truly still don't understand, and probably the music has a lot to do with it, because music does kind of dictate how you feel when certain things are happening. If you're going through heartbreak and you're listening to sad songs, then most likely it's going to make you feel sad, right? But I've been on a plane, and all of a sudden I'm thinking of something that happened in life, not particularly in that moment, and boom, start crying. And I remember the last time, I would say about, well, it was 2023. I would say like fall of 2023, and I'm heading to LA. I have my music, my headphones on, and I'm just sitting next to the window, and all of a sudden I'm thinking of family members that are perhaps going through very difficult situations. Family members that I'm connected to, that I love very much, and just to feel helpless, right? The fact that you can't do a lot, and but boom, I just start crying and getting emotional, and I'm just trying to hold it in, and I'm like, okay, if I need to cry, it's fine, but don't. No, I don't say don't anything. I just cry. I just try not to make a show, and I just kind of turn, and I can feel the tears coming down my cheeks, man. They're coming down my cheeks. I'm feeling sad, and I'm like, all right, relax, let it out. It's time. It's time to just let it all out and then move on. That's me. And it's not like I'm ashamed of crying, but I could imagine that people are looking at me like, is this dude crying? Are you crying right now, bro? I don't know. But I've had people look at me. Like I said, I am very reserved. I'm very private. So if I do it and it's a public setting, I'm going to try to pretty much turn around and not make a big show. But I know that it's happened, and it's okay. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. I mean, most of those people I'll never see again. So I've been okay when it comes to that. I just like, all right, I have to let it out, and it is what it is. It is what it is. So I wanted to share that, because people ask me, do you cry? We've had this conversation with different people. Do you cry? Do you get emotional? Yeah, I do. I do. It depends. I wouldn't say I'm an emotional person where anything happens and I'm gonna cry, but there's certain things that hit you. There's certain things that hit you, and they just make you feel very different. And it's like boom, just hitting you in the center of the heart. And I think that's where you kind of fold and you just let it out. That's been me, at least. Prior to that, I met a lot of people, a lot of guys. I have a lot of guy friends who were all born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. And as you guys know already, tough neighborhood like many neighborhoods in the country. And like myself, they were taught not to cry. They were taught that it was not a good thing, that it was unmanly to cry, that if you cried, you were not man enough, that you were weak, you were soft. And now that we talk about it, I reject it. Doesn't make you soft, doesn't make you weak. I think it makes you stronger. It makes you more open. It helps you understand better. It helps you see life in a different light. And I think that's one of the things that I speak to about now, right? When I speak to people, I speak about that. And I tell them, hey, man, it's fine. Things happen. It's okay. You'll be fine. As long as you're conscious, that you're going to move forward. As long as you're willing to take the next step forward. If you need help, get the help. If you need to speak to somebody, go and speak to somebody. But don't hold it in. because usually those become very negative feelings, and I've seen it firsthand. Not always pretty. Not always pretty. I'm not a fan of that. So I would rather people just express the way they feel, let it out, go and search the help they need, and talk about it. This has helped me a lot. The fact that I'm podcasting now has helped me a lot. And sometimes I do wonder, are these podcasts worth it? Am I wasting my time? Does anybody care? And every time I think that, because that's a thought that comes to mind often, I'm not going to lie to you. I've had people just randomly that follow me, that know me, say, hey, man, thank you for the podcast. Thank you for talking about the things you're talking about. And I say, you know what? All right, it is working. Whether it's 2 people, 3 people, if it's going to change, if it's going to help somebody, then I'm all for it. It takes a lot of work, like I said. It's a lot of dedication. So one of the things that I figured out since, like I mentioned earlier, when I record these podcasts, sometimes I have to do it the week off so I can feel it, so I can just go into the topic knowing that this is what I want to do. But there's other instances where that might not be the case because you get busy. I mean, I was out traveling west in California. I was in California for a couple of weeks. It's difficult to record a podcast. The last podcast that I posted was a talk I had at my alma mater, where I went to speak to current students about my book, about being a student there as well, and just pushing them to keep going. And I feel that now that I'm here and that I hear people talking about the fact that they're reacting very positively to this podcast, that they like it, then yeah, that motivates me. The fact that people share it, the fact that people are interested in what I have to say, is just like, all right. My biggest challenge, to end this, before we end, I want to just share this thought. The biggest challenge of this is the fact that I thought, and I still want to make it a very bilingual podcast, but it gets difficult when you get to the details, because you have to think in 2 different languages. You have to divide the thoughts. What do I say in English? What do I say in Spanish? And it's fine, but for me, it has to make sense. I want people to understand it. I want people to take it and say, you know what? This guy is speaking some real stuff. I want to talk about things that are not being talked about. If I can relate it to sports, perfect. Let's go. Danny Garcia was a perfect example of men cry. It happens. He's not the only athlete that's ever cried. There's many other athletes out there that are very open about being emotional, and I like that. I respect that, because I'm saying this is what it should be like. The fact that they have respect for the way they feel inside, and they're not willing to just hold it in and